Now, I want to ask you something on these lines. You have, by Swami's grace, moved in the journey from a doubting Thomas to become now a trusting Ted, and now moving on to almost attain that state where you feel the oneness of
Yeah.
divinity. We have been fortunate to actually see Baba physically,
Hmm.
but now the number of people that have physically seen Swami is actually, if you look at the population of the world, it is a microscopic minority.
Yes.
And now, every day you see so many new people are coming into the Sai Force. They're learning about Swami, they're hearing about Swami. Mysterious things are happening all over
Hmm.
the world. There are new Christians also coming into the fold.
Hmm.
And just like you went through this journey of doubt, I suppose there'll be a lot of Christians also will have very difficult time trying to reconcile many things as they learn about Swami, as they begin to read about Swami. What would you like to say to them?
This is the most important topic you've raised. This is the most important topic for all of us in this room and for you who might hear this on Radio Psi or see it. This is your duty is changing because Baba's physical form is no longer here. The heavy work of growing closer and closer to doing our duty for Baba has quadrupled in scope and size in this key area. You know, Christians, Catholics proselytize. They go out to share Jesus with the world, to spread Jesus to the world. Baba has a different view on this. He doesn't say, give my name to people. He doesn't say, go out and bring people into my fold. He doesn't say he wants a religion named after him. That doesn't mean you get off free. More than ever, now that his physical form, you have to live who you are as Baba. You have to live it in such a way that people will come up to you and say, I'm so depressed. The boss doesn't like me. I didn't get a raise. My family's suffering. What is it that you know that I don't know? You're not making any more money than me, but you have this glow about you. You have this assuredness about your life. And then you can share your story. You can share your story about, well, I have a teacher. My teacher's no longer alive, but it doesn't matter. He still holds this lesson for me to follow, and he comes to me with world events, and I know it's him, even though I don't see his face. People will ask who it is, and that's how they can learn to transform their lives. And I'll give you one quick example. I know you're running out of time.
No, it's okay, we can go on.
Yesterday, Prashanti Niliam, a 42-year-old man, walked up to my wife and said, Jody. He recognized her from our Radio Psi type interviews that we put on Soul Journeys on YouTube and Vimeo. He says, I recognize you from Soul Journeys. I'd like to see Ted and say hello to him. Well, you'll recognize him. He's unmistakable. He's 7 foot tall and he walks around here. You'll see he's big. You'll recognize who he is. He came up to me after Darshan. And this is the night before last. And I said, well, we're going to go tour this home for old people that Swami's devotees has started. You're welcome to come with us tomorrow. So he came with us yesterday. And I said, how long have you been following Swami? Well, I'm 42. I'm a professional tennis player. I've traveled the world. I've made millions of dollars. I've had wonderful events and relationships. Everything has fallen apart. Everything has depressed me. Everything has taken me downhill. I've only known Swami for 6 months. How did you come across Swami? Well, somebody gave me a link to some of the videos, and I've seen some of these compelling stories, and I couldn't believe them. Is that all that happened? Oh, no. 6 months ago, I was so depressed. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I got out of my bed. I didn't know what might happen. I was so depressed. So I called the emergency rescue hotline, I think in Australia, and they'll talk to you and they'll work you through your depression. And if you have tendencies for suicide, they will hold your hand and get you help. I called this emergency hotline and they were so busy, they put me on hold for 15 minutes. And I said, you could have committed suicide in 15 minutes if you were that depressed. What saved you? He said, I don't know what inspired me to do this, but I put the phone down and I got down on my knees. And I said to the universe, if you're there, God, I've tried everything. You must help me. Sai Baba came to him.
Sai Baba came to him. How?
I always ask that question. It doesn't matter how. His name came to him. His face came to him. He knew this much about Sai Baba and didn't believe, wasn't open to it. And one thing led after another, and he got a hold of Sam Sandweiss's book. He saw more videos, stories of people's lives being transformed just like that. And he had been on a spiritual path. It had been 100% head-oriented. And he had a total transformation of the heart. Complete. You see him now, he's in bliss. He's not delusional. He's not insane. He's as normal as you and me, except he's found bliss. He's found Baba's love. And this is after Baba's physical form left us. He's never seen Sai Baba. He was never a devotee while Sai Baba was alive. And the takeaway message for me is, we don't know the importance of our duty. You don't have to be a volunteer working for Radio Sai. You don't have to have your own video interviews called Soul Journeys. Just live your life. Be the Baba presence that he has instilled in your heart, and people will come to you. And they will find out what's changed your life. And in that inquiry, other lives are changed. And so I have no doubt about it whatsoever that Baba is changing the world. It has nothing to do with his Mahasamadhi. It doesn't matter one whit that his body is no longer here and that his presence can no longer be savored and that people have never been followers while he was alive physically. So that's my message, that we all have an unknown duty now that's bigger than all the other duties. Number one is to awaken to our true selves. Number two is to allow the awakening in us that's gradual be seen by other people without apology. You don't have to go say, come to Baba. Baba will fix your needs. He'll save your soul. You don't even have to ever mention his name, and it'll happen. And that's what's happening. We are at the end of the Kali Yuga. The Satya Yuga begins in 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. And it's an enormous cycle. But this is when the timing is not just coincidental, it's perfect for all of us who love Baba to share his divine essence in your form, and in your form, and in your form.
I'm reminded of a letter that Swami Vivekananda had written to his brother disciples in 1896 when he was in the West. In the letter, he very clearly mentions, so many of my brother disciples, they have got this tendency to put the stuff down everyone's throat that Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa is a god. He says, just keep this thing apart. You are converting our movement into a sect.
Yeah.
And he said, please distance yourself from such viewpoints, and if people want to worship him as God, we need not encourage or discourage them. However, the masses probably will want the person, but the higher ones will want the principle.
Yeah.
And he goes on to say, both are needed, but principles are universal. Stick to the principles and let people think whatever they like of the person.
And that he was the first to bring the message of Advaita to the West. And he was the first to rekindle interest in the message that was alive and kicking and very healthy at the beginning of Christianity, at the beginning of Judaism. But in their wisdom, the leaders of these religions allowed that concept to fall away, to not be practiced, to be forgotten. He brought it back as if it were brand new. And we can all live that lesson today. I had an example of that same concept that Vivekananda talked about 11, 12, 14 years ago. I brought home some wonderful interviews on Soul Journeys and showed them to my Sai Baba study circle class. There were 30 of us, 40 of us there. We met in Cleveland, Ohio, and if they knew I was bringing a video to show them somebody's story, there'd be 50 people there. And a woman by the name of Susan came up to me one night, and she was very bright and very serious as a spiritual aspirant. And she said, Ted, I've noticed you've been bringing some stories about materializations and miracles, and those are all good, and it's like candy. They're fun. But I would rather not see those. And I said, well, what was it that you'd rather see? She said, I would rather see, by a margin of 100 to 1, stories of personal transformation, how Sai Baba and the lives of the devotees transformed their lives. And I learned that lesson myself that day. I'll still sneak in some materialization stories and some wonderful miracles. Who doesn't like those? Those are Baba's candy for us.
Visiting cards.
Visiting cards. Tinsel, trinkets, and trash so that you'll come to know and appreciate what I really have to give you. The moksha, the liberation, knowing who you are. There's the Ted you think I am, there's the Ted I think I am, and then there's the real Ted. And nobody in this room has a clue as to who the real Bishu is, the real Ted is. So these are the stories that are really worth explaining if we can get our hands on them. And as Vivekananda put it so eloquently, this woman put it to me the same way. Share the stories of personal transformation. And that's what you do so well on Radio Sai. I don't know how many thousands of interviews you have now. And I'm so glad you're doing video interviews because it conveys a person's truth, not just verbally, but through their heart and through their eyes. You can see that in individuals, and that's why I'm so happy doing it with my work. Because I sit there like this, and I'll hear a person's story, and it doesn't matter if I'm going to share it with anybody else on the face of the earth. They have a deep impact on me. And that's what we can do now, just like Vivekananda said.
I think that boomerang leela that is happening in your life is happening with each one of us in the studio too. Yeah. I think every one of us are doing what we are doing because we are doing it actually for our own spiritual growth.
Passion is infectious. And when we realize that we go through levels of passion just like we go through levels of class.
Yes.
You're going to be a scientist. You're in the first level, second level, third level, 20 levels down the road. You're still learning more about science. It's even more important with Baba at the helm on our spiritual growth. Because I'm starting to encounter now, and maybe you are too. Tell me if you are. I'm starting to encounter real people. You have your truth detectors inside of you, and you try to tell if a person's legitimate and genuine. I'm starting to detect more and more realized people. I really am. Not that I am. I'll probably be the last on this earth. I hope not, but I could very well be. It's okay. I bask in the light of people who I sense are already realized. And I know them because of three characteristics. Their compassion, their humility, and their almost or total absence of ego. So when you come across a person, and they're not advertising themselves, they're not volunteering to be interviewed, they don't care if you listen to them or not, they're at equanimity. But when you come across a person who has deep compassion, tons of humility, and almost no or none of the ego, they become magnets and draw you to them. And just basking in their aura grows you. And Baba is the supreme teacher of that, whether he walks the darshan hall or not.
Fantastic. And I think that is really so much good news, because often the news in the media can be very distressing. And these news don't many times reach people.
Yeah.
And I think this is the good news that has to be shared.
I know something about news.
Yes.
I know very little. I worked in my dad's hardware store. I don't know if a hardware store is a concept in India or not, growing up. So I know about hardware, and I know about news. That's all I know about. Maybe a little bit about Baba. And I know that after 10,000 interviews and 44 years total of reporting on rapes, homicides, car accidents, corrupt politicians, and people committing suicide, and there are all these awful, awful, awful things, and wars and pestilence. I know that all of those 44 years were the kindergarten, were the primary school of my journalistic experience, so that I would one day be at a level to share stories about Sai Baba with others. And I've said this to my wife a dozen times. It's almost been 4 years since I retired. The most satisfying journalism I've ever done is now. It fills me, and I'm happy to share it, not because it's an ego thing necessarily. There might be a little ego left in all of us, but it's because my eyes bug out just like yours do when somebody says something that's unbelievable. I won't go into details, but I heard a story just 5 minutes before starting this interview from one of your coworkers there,
yes.
And I went like that. Really? You saw this? It happened?
Yes.
And this is all there for all of us. It's all there for all of us.
And I think that is a message for all of us who many times get distressed by reading all the news items. There is actually a lot of good happening. And I want to ask you, now that you have interviewed so many people and also met so many people who are realized souls. How do you see the current trend of the world?
How do I see the current trend of the world? Quote Jack Hawley. Jack Hawley is a great Sai Baba devotee who just turned 80. He came through our neck of the woods in Florida this summer in his RV. He and his wife, Louise, have spent the last 35 years 6 months in Prushanti Nilayam, 6 months in Palm Springs, California. This is their fourth generation of RV. Can you imagine two 80-year-olds driving through the mountains of America from coast to coast in an RV by themselves? They do it. All they need is Baba. Baba's with them the whole way. They're perfectly safe. And the quote I'm thinking of is when I sat down in this little flat here at Prushanti Nilayam to interview him, I asked him about fear. I said, what causes you fear? Nothing. He's the one who told me that when he gets up in the morning at 4 o'clock, before he eats the first mouthful of breakfast, he says, Om Sai Ram 10,000 times. He wasn't boasting. I said, well, what do you do to fill your day? He says, well, Baba fills my day. I asked him, how does Baba fill your day? Well, when I get up before breakfast, I say Sai Ram 10,000 times. It's phenomenal. I laugh because I'm amazed that people are capable of doing this. So I asked him about fear. There's much to fear. That's the question you were asking me. The world's going to hell in a handbasket, as the phrase goes in America, or so it seems. It's not going anywhere. But the fear that's caused as a result of all this strife doesn't exist for Jack Hawley. What do you mean it doesn't exist? What about if you got sick? Oh, passing clouds, passing clouds. What if Louise, your wife, got sick? Oh, we both know that she's okay, as Baba says. It's only your body that's sick. Well, what about your daughter? What about a tragedy that might claim her life? That doesn't cause me fear. I know what's real. I know that wouldn't be real. Well, what about nuclear holocaust? Well, that doesn't cause me any fear at all. Well, what about death, a painful death for you? Oh, no, that's all part of the illusion. That doesn't cause me any fear at all. I won't be going anywhere. My body is just my body. What he taught me was that you can get to the point in this world, following Baba's teachings, where fear ends. It just ends. If you actually believe Baba's number one message, which is the hardest message for any of us earthly beings to believe, that none of this is real, that this is an illusion, and that my heart is an illusion, and that Baba's form is an illusion, because he said so. Don't become addicted to my form. Well, that's the key. How could there be fear? How could there be worry about the next third world war or pestilence or the next typhoon? Now, this is for a mature aspirant. I would never suggest, and please forgive me if anybody's in pain right now, I would never consciously say this to anybody in pain of any kind, because it wouldn't be fair, because I don't want to be tested. You know, if somebody does some harm to my son or my daughter or my wife, I don't know where I would be. I would be destroyed. I don't have as much faith as Jack Hawley, maybe. So I would never say this consciously or knowingly in somebody's presence who's in pain. But I'm assuming that those of us who are on the spiritual path of Sai Baba see the merit in this interpretation in these words. We have to follow his greatest teaching, if not in spirit, if not in practicality, at least beginning in the mind. And there's a great phrase that we use in America that I've used to build my spiritual life. Fake it until you make it. You ever heard that phrase?
Yeah, they say you begin to pretend, start pretending, then you will tend to do it, and then you'll end up doing it.
Yeah. Fake it till you make it. I mean, it's trite. It's a cliche, but it's true. We all get there. Not one of us will miss the train. Not one of us will be left behind. I don't care if it takes you one more lifetime or me 100 more lifetimes. It doesn't matter. So if you really believe that, then you will start to see that all of this is Maya. And in the illusion of life, we start to use that to our advantage. So here's Ted. I'm looking at Baba's picture. It's a photograph taken when he was maybe 50 or so. And I love Baba's form, and I love Prushanti Nilayam. But the real me is starting to suggest very loudly, whether it's really the real me or I'm faking, believing it's the real me, that this is part of Advaita. Every construct you think of is part of, even ideas are material. You have to start using the illusion to elevate yourself through it until you get on top of it and grow beyond it. That's how I look at it. It's still impossible for most people to understand, even me. That's how I envision it. That it's here for a purpose. In the mind of God, there was an errant thought that I think I am real and that I'm going to be happy if I amass millions of dollars. Well, it's not true. Or I'm going to be poor if my house burns down and I lose my wife. Well, it's not true. It's just not true. You are God, and I know lots of people who talk that way, and I'm not one. I'm surprised to hear myself say that right now. In the Course in Miracles, in the Unity Church, they'll go so far as to say, you are a shard of the divine. You are the light of God. You are a perfect child of God. All of those are wrong. You are Baba.
And that is what Swami said right from the time he announced his avatarhood.
Even my saying you are Baba is wrong, because that implies separation from God. That implies that you are Baba and maybe I'm not. The only way to say this is I am. So if you say I am, I'll know that you're my teacher, because I need to hear that lesson expressed that way over and over again. So I don't know if this answers your question very well, but it's a very important concept.
Yes, I
to
think
deal with the world
that
today.
That is the pinnacle
Yeah.
of every spiritual aspirant.
We have our duty.
Yes.
If India falls into crisis, you
Yes.
have your duty to help
Yes.
Mother India,
Yes.
and you will.
Yes.
You can say there's one part of me that sees it totally as illusion, why bother? But there's another part that says, Ted and others remind me to work within the illusion. So do your duty.
Do your role.
Do your work. Yeah.
Yes.
And let that bring you to the point of equanimity. My view of life can be simply reduced to equanimity, and that is, here's fear, here's joy, here's pain, here's pleasure, here's prosperity, here's good health, here's death. Here, you can't see it, but way up at the ceiling, if I could reach that high, is equanimity. And it is the position where whatever you're looking at, World War III and the next nuclear holocaust, or the birth of a child that's pure love, they register the same. They register the same. Your heart doesn't go up, it doesn't go down, your heartbeat. It's not because you're indifferent. It's because there is no separation from God, and all of that is illusory.
That is what is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. The mark of a true devotee is being always in the same level, equanimity.
That's it. That's my goal. I wonder how quickly I'll get there.
And I think, as you mentioned, if we begin to change our perspective, then slowly we will also get to know the real thing and not be so scared or so depressed about what is happening. In fact, when I was talking to Gene Massey, he said, for me, the golden age has already arrived. I'm in the golden age.
Sure.
It's a change of perspective.
I think this is a slight exaggeration, but I think I know 1,000 people for whom the golden age has already started. Let's say 100 people.
So you have to make that change in your vision, as Swami says.
You might still get down. You might still get depressed. You might still get angry. But those are passing clouds too, just like a cold, just like the flu. Those are all passing clouds. You spring back from them. The people who get to the level that no longer have a doubt or any fluctuation in their love, there's a term for that. Are you familiar? You of all people should be. In the West, we've never heard of the term before. Jivan Mukta.
Yes.
Jivan Mukta is not just a realized soul, but it's a realized soul at 24/7.
Yes.
Most realized people, those who are thought of, they get into bliss and self-realization and they fall out of it. And a bad occurrence will bring them out of it. I know of a Jivan Mukta. I've interviewed her. She's now deceased. She was one of what Baba said was, I think, 100 or fewer Jivan Muktas at the moment. They're not that common. But you can see if you have the great privilege to be in their presence, that they're just what you described, Bishu. They're at a level of equanimity, and you can say anything and it won't bother you. Well, Baba's the example of that. Baba's way above a Jivan Mukta, but in the human form of those who might be walking the earth today, you couldn't hurt them if your life depended on it. You couldn't disappoint them. You couldn't cause them anger. You couldn't make them feel awful for your ignorance. They would just see you as an infant and smile and love you all the more. That's what we have to look forward to.
And I think one of the very simplest ways that Swami has given us how we can implement this in our lives is whatever happens to me is for my own good.
Well, after years and years and years of trying to understand the problems I make for myself and the pain I bring myself, I now have a one-word response to all of it. Whenever it happens, sometimes it takes me 3 days to say this one word. Sometimes it takes me 3 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Baba. No matter, knock on wood, I'm not inviting more travail and tragedy into my life right now. But whenever it occurs, the faster I get to thank you, Baba. I'm not a masochist. I'm not grateful for hurt. I now see it totally differently. It's a call to awaken to our higher self. So why would you not be thankful for that? It's a whole different way of looking at the good and the bad in our lives. The perceived good and bad. There is no bad.
You talked about good and bad and perceived good and bad. I just read how Baba has described this 4 different levels, the different stages, different kinds of personalities that we see in this world. Swami said, the person who sees only good, only right everywhere, he is divine. The person who sees right as right and bad as bad is human. The person who shuts his eyes to the right and sees only the bad is something like of an animal nature. And the person who sees the right and calls that and manipulates that as bad is demon.
Well, gee, those. I didn't read that. I haven't heard that before. Thank you for sharing that. It's very helpful. The first one again was the person who sees
everything as good and right is divine.
Well, that's where I'm faking it until I make it, because I'm not there yet, but I'm really faking it.
Yes.
I want that to be true.
I really love these beautiful things that Swami says. So simply he makes us make spirituality for us.
And your choice is to accept it or condemn it. It's your choice. In the end, you'll find out how true that is, and you will also make it with all the other people. But the Course in Miracles says the choice you have, Baba is keen on saying we have as much free will as a donkey tethered to a hitching post.
Yes.
The Course in Miracles, which he wrote, says everybody gets there to the same destination. The choice is yours, whether you want to do it quickly or take the scenic route. Pretend you're a millionaire for a while and enjoy the 5-star hotels and looking down on people below your class. You'll still get there. It'll just take a little longer.
Probably the road has a little more of ups and downs. Wonderful. So you mentioned that everything that happens in our life, ultimately we have to learn to say thank you, God. And today, now I want to thank Swami for enabling you to come to the studio and share these reflections and experiences with us. Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking your time out. And I want to go back to your conversation, the talk that you gave in 2008. You were in Prashant Nilayam that time and gave that powerful speech in the presence of Swami. And you are now again in Prashant Nilayam. This is 2012 and you're in the studios of Radio Sai. What would you like to say to all the devotees and everyone as we prepare for another Christmas?
Boy, that's a big one. A lot of people put a great value on forgiveness for others. Forgive everybody for their hurts that they've caused you. I no longer feel that way. I feel all of it is part of the divine plan. Again, I come to, love is important. Forgiveness is important in the right scale. Gratitude is of maximum importance. Know who you really are and just be grateful for that. Know the season's joy and happiness it brings is not illusory. It doesn't last for just a minute. It does for many people in the material world. But you can keep the Christmas joy in your heart forever with Baba's teachings, with Christ's teachings. They're one and the same. So as my good friend Father Charles Ogata used to say here many, many times over the years, be happy. And he would mimic Baba. And he would say, be happy. Be. Be aware that you're living in the moment of time that's greater than any moment before. Not just in the history of the world, not just in the history of the universe, but in the history of all there is. This is the moment to be most grateful. You're with Baba. You're one with the divine. You are the divine. Be happy. That's what I would say.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Sai Ram.
Sai Ram.